Hello and happy Monday. I hope you're doing really well so far. And I want to let you know that you're going to have a test tomorrow over all the different sections of the worms that we've been studying. And so that is going to include section 23.4, 23.5, and 23.6. So I thought I'd do a little video to review some of the characteristics of the worms that we've been learning about. And then after you watch this video, be sure to click the link and fill out the questions that are asked. Also pay attention throughout the whole video because I'm going to have some really random weird question on there that people who watch the video would know. And I'm just kind of trying to make sure that everybody watches the video because a lot of this you could get out of your book, but I want to highlight the really important things. And so with that being said, let's talk about characteristics of all worms. All worms are in kingdom Animalia. That is important to know because that means that they're all multicellular and their cells are eukaryotic. That means that each and every cell of a worm has a nucleus that's bound by a membrane, and it's also going to have a lot of the organelles that we learned about in the chapter about cells, like mitochondria, lysosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi bodies, things like that. Okay, in addition, animals are heterotrophs. And that means that they have to obtain their food from another source. They cannot carry out photosynthesis like a plant could or can. And then also their cells will never have cell walls like a plant cell would. And so those are some basic characteristics of animals, and the worms fit all of those characteristics. Okay, also, in addition to being in kingdom Animalia, all worms have bilateral symmetry. And so I just drew, don't make fun of my drawing, but I just drew a plain old, maybe it's a flatworm. And bilateral symmetry means that you can draw one line straight down the worm and you would have like mirror halves. You can only do it one way though. So I have the same color marker, but you'll be able to get the idea. So if I draw a line all the way through, that's not perfectly straight, but I have like a left half and a right half, or a top and bottom half. And I couldn't really draw a line like down the center because I'd have a head end and a tail end. And so there's really only one way you could draw that line and get the mirror halves, like the symmetrical halves. So that's bilateral symmetry. All the worms that we studied have bilateral symmetry. And finally on here, they all have some sort of digestive system. Like how great their digestive system is actually depends on the phylum that they're in, but we'll talk more about that later as we go through each phylum. So the first phylum of worms that we talked about, and I think this was in 23.4, yes, Platyhelminthes. The common name for this is flatworms. And so flatworms are basically flat. They're very, very skinny, but they could be a little bit wider. Some of them are free living, like one of the big examples that your book gave and we saw in the video would be planarians. And those can swim around in the water. They're pretty cool and awesome. Those are not parasitic. But the bottom two, tapeworms and flukes, those are definitely parasitic. And you don't want either one of those. They're really nasty. And so another thing about Platyhelminthes, the flatworms, is that they do have a sort of digestive system, but it's more like a digestive sac because there's only one opening, which is really kind of gross because that means that they have to eat food through their mouth, like digest it, and then they basically have to spit it back out of their mouth. And so it's not very efficient because they can't really keep eating and eating and eating. Basically, they have to eat, digest it, spit it back out before they can eat more things. So it's not as efficient as a complete digestive tract with one-way motion. This is like a two-way motion, but one opening. So their mouth is really functioning like the anus as well, which is really kind of gross. Another thing that makes those gross. All right, so that was the Platyhelminthes. And then we talked about Nematoda. Nematoda, those would be all the roundworms. And there are so many species of these. And they actually have a complete digestive tract, meaning they take food in through their mouth and then they digest it, and the waste products come out of their anus, which is the other end. And so this is more sophisticated, it's more functional, more efficient, you might even say. And so good for them. A lot of the roundworms are free living, and it was really cool. I hope you enjoyed the video that we watched on this that showed how all of life as we know it actually depends on the survival of these roundworms, which is pretty amazing. Many of them are very, very tiny. So a lot of them are free living. Some of the ones that they talked about in the book, they didn't go into it as much on the video, but we can have some really bad parasitic ones that can infect humans. One of them is Trichinella spiralis, and that likes to hide out in pork, and you can get really bad sick from eating pork that's undercooked. And so always eat pork that's cooked well. And then hookworm and pinworm and threadworm, those were some other examples. And fortunately, though, most of them are free living and not parasitic. So those are the roundworms or the nematodes. And then similar to that, but yet in a different phylum, is Rotifera, the rotifers. And they're also kind of a roundish shaped body, but they're very, very tiny, but their head, or around their head, I should say, around their mouth, is a lot of little cilia. You know, remember the cilia are like hair-like projections, and it can spin. Like if something's like rotary, it's rotational, spinning. And so that's where they get the name rotifer from. And these are really, really tiny. They're a lot smaller than a lot of plankton out there, but they're considered animals because they are multicellular. They are heterotrophs. They tend to live in fresh water. And so you'd have to see these through a microscope. And then, of course, I already talked about the cilia going around. And they also, like the nematodes, have a complete digestive tract with food coming in one way and going through the mouth and going out through the anus. And then finally, we studied about Annelida, or the annelids, which are the segmented worms. And these definitely have a complete digestive tract, just like the nematodes and rotifers do. But they also have a closed circulatory system, and they have what's called a coelom. And you wouldn't know, there's the word spelled out. You pronounce it, it kind of sounds like ceiling, but it's coelom. And a coelom is a fluid-filled body cavity that's lined by tissue. And there's like an even more like scientific explanation, but that's the main part of what you need to know. And so we have, as humans, a coelom. Like we have fluid around our organs and things like that. And from time to time, you'll hear someone talking about that fluid becoming infected or something like that. So those of y'all who go on into the medical field, like nursing or a doctor, you'll learn a lot more about that later on. But annelids, those are the first animals that we're studying that had a coelom. And then the nematodes are kind of like, they have the cavity, but it's not, they have the fluid, but it's not lined by tissue. And so those are called pseudocoelomates. Let me see if I can find this in here, because I was going to write that down. And so I'm going to write that down. Pseudo. So we would say that, actually I wrote it on the rotifers, but it applies to the nematodes too. These are pseudo coelomates. Like if something is pseudo, it's like kind of, but not really. Those kind of have, they do have a fluid around their organs and stuff like that, but it's not lined with tissue. So those are pseudocoelomates. I'll get it right in a second. And then back to the flatworms. These were the most basic. Remember, they don't even have a complete digestive tract. They're acoelomates. So you just put an A. And then whenever you have A in front of something, it means like not. Like if it's atypical, it's not typical. And so this is, I'm going to make sure I spell this right. You know me and my spelling. Okay. So these are acoelomates, like meaning not having a coelom. And so the platyhelminths are really the most basic worms that we've studied because they don't have a complete digestive tract. They just have a little sac in their mouth. It's the same thing basically as their anus. It's really gross. And they don't have a coelom at all. They are acoelomates. And then the nematodes and rotifers, okay, those are pseudocoelomates. And then of course, the annelids or the segmented worms have a coelom. And I don't think I talked about examples yet for those. So the earthworms are the thing that we would think of most probably, but sandworms and also leeches. Some of these live in water like leeches and stuff like that, but obviously earthworms like to burrow. And if you watch the video on annelids, it was pretty cool. And a lot of them are really, really good at digging and things like that. So there are tons more examples than what I just told you there, but you can go back and look at your other notes for that. So hope you've learned a lot about worms, and I hope you're ready to take the test tomorrow. And I just want to point out that I like to try to support local businesses. So I had to run an errand earlier today, and so I went through the drive-thru at Eliano's, and I have a Tuscany toffee latte. So I hope you're able to get out and about occasionally and support local businesses and just continue sending in prayer requests and comments and things like that, because I really do read all of them, and I really have been praying for you guys. And just let me know, like reach out to me through an email even if you have any issues or if you need to discuss something. Remember that even though we're not in the classroom, I'm still here for you. And good luck on your test tomorrow. And again, keep up the good work. I'm so proud of how almost every day I have everybody in biology turning in their work, and that is amazing. So I'm so proud of you guys. Keep up the great work, and good luck on your test tomorrow.